My father called me, naive for my dream. Now his company works for mine. The silverware clinked against fine china as my father cut into his steak with surgical precision. The dining room of our colonial-style home in Greenwich, Connecticut, had always felt more like a boardroom than a place for family meals. My mother sat quietly at the other end of the 12-foot mahogany table, her eyes darting between my father and me, anticipating the storm that was about to break. "So," my father said, not looking up from his plate, "Harvard Business School rejected you." It wasn't a question. The letter had arrived that morning, and somehow he already knew. I set down my fork. "Yes." "Stanford as well?" "Yes." Charles Wakefield Sr., CEO of Wakefield Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing conglomerate that had been in our family for 3 generations, finally looked up. His steel-gray eyes, the same color as mine, fixed on me with disappointment that had become all too familiar over my 22 years. "And you still want to pursue this, what do you call it, sustainable agriculture technology?" He said the words like they were foreign and distasteful. "Regenerative agricultural systems," I corrected. "And yes, I do." My mother sipped her wine nervously. "Alex," my father said, using my full name as he always did when he was about to deliver a lecture. "You graduated summa cum laude from Yale with a degree in economics. You could join Wakefield Industries tomorrow as VP of Operations. In 10 years, you would be ready to take over as CEO. "I don't want to manufacture industrial equipment, Dad." "What you want," he said, setting down his knife with a deliberate click, "is to throw away generations of family legacy to grow vegetables with robots." I fought to keep my voice steady. "What I want is to develop integrated systems that can transform how we produce food while healing the planet. The climate crisis is real. Soil degradation is real. Food insecurity is real. These are the problems that need solving in the 21st century, not how to build a more efficient assembly line for parts that will be obsolete in 5 years. My father's laugh was short and cold. "And you think you'll solve these problems with your, what was it called again? Eco-harvest?" "Terra Nova Systems," I said quietly. "Right." He sawed another piece of steak. "You know what will happen? You'll burn through your trust fund on this naive fantasy. Then in 5 years, when you've failed, because you will fail, Alex, you'll come crawling back to Wakefield Industries, and you'll have to start at the bottom like any other new hire." The words stung, as they were meant to. My father had mastered the art of the targeted strike, knowing exactly which insecurities to exploit. I had spent my whole life trying to earn his approval, and here I was, deliberately walking away from the path he had laid out for me. "I won't fail," I said. "The business landscape is littered with the corpses of idealistic startups just like yours. Do you know what percentage of new businesses fail in the first 5 years? 80%? And for something as speculative as agricultural technology? 95%. Easily." I had researched those statistics extensively. I knew them better than he did. "Those numbers don't scare me." "Then you're not just naive. You're foolish." My mother finally spoke up. "Charles, please. Alex has always had good judgment." He ignored her. "You think the world needs saving, and you're the one to do it. Classic hubris of youth." Meanwhile, Wakefield Industries employs over 3,000 people. We provide stable jobs, healthcare, retirement plans. We contribute millions to the economy. That's real impact, not some pie-in-the-sky dream of revolutionizing agriculture. I pushed my plate away, my appetite gone. Wakefield Industries also produces tons of carbon emissions annually, sources materials from environmentally destructive mines, and perpetuates an economic model that's dying. The future is in sustainability, not extraction. My father's face hardened. The future is in making sound business decisions based on market realities, not chasing trends. This green technology bubble will burst, just like every other bubble. And when it does, what will you have to show for it? I stood up from the table. I guess we'll find out. Sit down, Alex. We're not finished. I am. I placed my napkin on the table. Thank you for dinner, Mom. My father's voice followed me as I walked out. When this fails, and it will fail, don't expect me to bail you out. I paused at the doorway and turned back. I've never expected that from you, Dad. That night, as I packed my belongings into my car, I knew I was at a crossroads. Behind me lay the certain path: join my father's company, follow in his footsteps, eventually inherit the corner office with the view of the Manhattan skyline. Ahead lay uncertainty, risk, and quite possibly failure. But also possibility. The chance to build something meaningful. Something that could help address the mounting environmental crisis that my father's generation had largely created and then ignored. As I drove away from my childhood home, heading toward the small apartment I'd rented in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. I had just burned a very secure bridge. Now I had no choice but to build a new one. Chapter 2, Seeds of Rebellion. My relationship with my father hadn't always been so contentious. In fact, for much of my childhood, I had idolized him. Charles Wakefield Sr. was, by any conventional measure, a success story. He had taken Wakefield Industries, founded by his grandfather during the industrial boom following World War II, and transformed it from a regional manufacturer of industrial equipment into a diversified corporation with global reach. Our home library contained dozens of business and leadership books with my father's name on the acknowledgments page. He was quoted in the Wall Street Journal and Fortune. He sat on multiple corporate boards. He was the epitome of the American dream, a self-made man who had built upon his inheritance to create something greater. But as I grew older, the cracks in that perfect image began to show. I started to notice how he treated service workers with barely concealed contempt. How he would talk about necessary layoffs at the dinner table without a flicker of emotion. How his eyes glazed over whenever my mother tried to discuss anything not related to business or status. The real turning point came during the summer between my junior and senior years at Yale. My father had arranged an internship for me at Wakefield Industries headquarters in New York. I was assigned to the Strategic Planning Department, where I was given access to internal documents about the company's environmental impact and labor practices. What I found disturbed me deeply. Wakefield Industries had systematically violated environmental regulations across multiple states, calculating that the fines would be less costly than proper compliance. They had outsourced manufacturing to countries with lax labor laws, resulting in unsafe working conditions and what amounted to poverty wages. They had lobbied aggressively against climate legislation that might impact their bottom line. When I brought these concerns to my father, his response was dismissive. That's how business works, Alex. It's not personal. It's just the reality of staying competitive in a global market. But don't you think we have a responsibility to do better? I had asked. He had looked at me with something between pity and amusement. You've been listening to too many of those liberal professors. The purpose of a corporation is to maximize shareholder value. That's it. All this talk about social responsibility and environmental stewardship is just marketing to appease the millennials. I am a millennial, Dad. And you'll grow out of these idealistic notions once you have real responsibilities. That conversation left me with a profound sense of disillusionment. The man I had once admired now seemed morally bankrupt, a relic of a business philosophy that was not just outdated, but actively harmful. I returned to Yale for my senior year with a new perspective. I changed my focus from finance to environmental economics. I joined campus groups advocating for sustainability. I started reading everything I could find about regenerative agriculture, renewable energy, and circular economy models. It was during a guest lecture by Dr. Elena Michaels, a pioneer in agricultural technology, that the idea for Terra Nova Systems first took root in my mind. Dr. Michaels presented compelling data showing how traditional industrial agriculture was depleting topsoil at an alarming rate, while alternative approaches like regenerative farming could actually reverse this damage while sequestering carbon. After the lecture, I waited in line to speak with her. "Dr. Michaels, your research is fascinating," I said when my turn came. "But it seems like the adoption of these methods is still very limited. What's the main barrier?" She smiled, seeming pleased by the question. "Scale and integration. Small farms can implement these practices relatively easily, but scaling them to the level needed to feed the world's population is challenging. We need better technology to monitor soil health, more efficient ways to integrate multiple crops in the same space, and systems that can adapt to increasingly unpredictable weather patterns." "So it's a technology problem, not a knowledge problem?" "Exactly. We know what works, but we need better tools to implement it widely." She tilted her head, studying me. "You're not an environmental science major, are you?" "Economics," I admitted. "But I'm interested in how economic incentives could be aligned with environmental restoration." "That's precisely the kind of interdisciplinary thinking we need." She reached into her bag and handed me a card. "If you're serious about this, email me. I'm advising several startups in this space, and they're always looking for people who understand both the financial and ecological dimensions." That card became my talisman. I carried it with me everywhere, taking it out occasionally to remind myself that there was a path forward that combined my business education with my growing environmental concerns. By the time graduation approached, I had developed a rough business plan for Terra Nova Systems. The company would develop integrated hardware and software solutions for regenerative agriculture, sensors to monitor soil health, AI systems to optimize crop rotations, robotic implements that could work with polyculture fields rather than monocrops, and a data platform to help farmers transition to more sustainable practices while maintaining profitability. I applied to several business schools, hoping to refine my plan and build a network that could help bring it to life. But my heart wasn't really in those applications. Deep down, I knew I wanted to start building immediately, not spend 2 more years in a classroom discussing case studies of other people's ventures. So when the rejection letters came, it felt almost like a sign. It was time to take the leap. The day after that fateful dinner with my father, I emailed Dr. Michaels. To my surprise, she responded within hours, inviting me to meet her at the Agricultural Technology Incubator, where she served as an advisor. The incubator was housed in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Boston. Inside, the space hummed with energy. One area contained vertical farming setups with purple LED lights illuminating leafy greens. Another featured workbenches where people in lab coats tinkered with what looked like complex irrigation systems. In a corner, a group huddled around, computer screens displaying what appeared to be weather modeling data. Dr. Michaels greeted me warmly. "Alex Wakefield? Welcome to AgTech Nexus." For the next 2 hours, she introduced me to various entrepreneurs and researchers, each working on different aspects of the agricultural technology puzzle. There was Maya Chen, developing microbiome enhancers that could replace chemical fertilizers. Raj Patel, whose drone systems could monitor crop health and identify pest problems before they spread. Darius Williams, creating blockchain-based systems to certify and track sustainably produced food from farm to consumer. By the end of the tour, my mind was racing with possibilities. These were exactly the kinds of innovations that could be integrated into the system I envisioned. "So," Dr. Michaels said as we sat down in a small meeting room, "tell me about your idea." For the next 30 minutes, I outlined my vision for Terra Nova Systems. Dr. Michaels listened attentively, occasionally asking probing questions that helped me clarify aspects I hadn't fully thought through. When I finished, she nodded thoughtfully. "It's ambitious. Very ambitious. Most startups in this space focus on solving one specific problem: soil sensors, or robotics, or data analytics. You're proposing to integrate all of these into a comprehensive system. That's where I see the gap, I said. Each of these technologies is powerful on its own, but the real transformation happens when they work together as part of a holistic approach. I agree, but integration is exponentially more complex than developing a single technology. I know. That's why I'm here. I understand the vision and the economics, but I need partners who understand the technical aspects better than I do. Dr. Michaels smiled. Well, you've come to the right place. She pulled out a notebook and began jotting down names. These are people you should talk to. Some are here at the incubator. Others are in my network elsewhere. She tore out the page and handed it to me. One more thing, Alex. How are you planning to fund this venture? I hesitated. This was the question I had been dreading. I have a trust fund. It's not huge by startup standards, but it's enough to get things off the ground if I'm careful. And your family? Will they be supportive? Having a financial and emotional safety net can make a big difference in the entrepreneurial journey. I thought of my father's cold dismissal. No. In fact, quite the opposite. She studied me for a moment. That will make things harder. But sometimes having something to prove can be a powerful motivator. She stood up. Come back next week. I'll arrange for you to meet some potential technical co-founders. As I drove back to my apartment that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. For years, I had been pushing against the weight of my father's expectations, defining myself largely in opposition to him. Now, for the first time, I was moving toward something of my own creation. The seed of rebellion had been planted long ago, in those moments of disillusionment with my father's business practices. But now, it was beginning to sprout into something more substantial. A vision for a different kind of company, one that could thrive financially while contributing to environmental restoration rather than degradation. I didn't know then how difficult the journey would be, or how deeply it would test me. I didn't know that my father's prediction of failure would haunt me through countless sleepless nights, or that his shadow would loom over nearly every decision I made. I didn't know that I would come close to proving him right more times than I cared to admit. All I knew was that I had found my path, and I was determined to follow it wherever it led. Chapter 3. Finding My Tribe. When I returned to AgTech. Nexus the following week, Dr. Michaels had arranged for me to meet 3 potential technical co-founders. Each brought a different expertise that could be crucial to realizing the integrated system I envisioned for Terra Nova. The first was Sofia Rodriguez, a soil microbiologist who had developed new sensor technology that could provide real-time data on soil health metrics beyond the usual measurements of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Her sensors could detect microbial activity, carbon sequestration rates, and early indicators of soil structure degradation. Most soil testing is still stuck in the chemical paradigm, Sophia explained as she showed me prototype sensors that were small enough to be distributed throughout a field. Farmers send samples to a lab and get back numbers that tell them which chemicals to add. But soil is a living system, not just a medium for holding chemical nutrients. My sensors track the biological activity that indicates true soil health. The second candidate was Marcus Chen, a robotics engineer who had previously worked at Boston Dynamics before deciding to apply his skills to agricultural challenges. The problem with current farm equipment, Marcus said, is that it's designed for monoculture systems, vast fields of a single crop planted in neat rows. But regenerative agriculture often involves polycultures, cover crops, and more complex field layouts. We need robots that can navigate these complexities, identifying different plant species and interacting with them appropriately. The third was Daniel Kim, a data scientist specializing in ecological modeling. Daniel had developed algorithms that could predict how different combinations of crops, soil amendments, and management practices would affect both yield and environmental outcomes. Agriculture is fundamentally about managing complex biological systems, Daniel explained. My models help farmers optimize for multiple variables simultaneously: yield, soil health, carbon sequestration, water usage, biodiversity. It's not about maximizing any one metric at the expense of others, but finding the sweet spot where economic and ecological goals align. As I listened to each of them present their work, I felt a growing sense of excitement. These were exactly the kinds of innovations I had envisioned integrating into Terra Nova systems. More importantly, each of these potential co-founders shared my fundamental belief that agriculture could be both productive and regenerative. After the individual meetings, Dr. Michaels brought us all together in a conference room. "I've explained Alex's vision to each of you," she said. "Now I want to hear your thoughts. Is this something you'd be interested in pursuing together?" There was a moment of silence as they looked at each other, then at me. Sophia spoke first. "I've had offers from agricultural chemical companies wanting to buy my sensor technology. They would integrate it into their existing systems, which are fundamentally about selling more chemicals. What appeals to me about Terra Nova is that it starts from a different premise, that soil health is the foundation, not an afterthought." Marcus nodded. "Same here. I could go back to developing robots for military applications or warehouse automation. The money would be better, at least in the short term. But I got into robotics because I wanted to create technologies that help solve real problems, not just make existing systems more efficient." Daniel looked thoughtful. "My concern is practical. We're talking about developing multiple complex technologies and then integrating them into a cohesive system. That's ambitious even for a well-funded startup, which I gather we would not be." All eyes turned to me. This was the moment of truth. I took a deep breath. "I'll be honest. I have seed funding from my personal resources, but it's limited. We would need to be lean, prioritize carefully, and seek additional investment as we hit key milestones." I didn't mention that the personal resources were my trust fund, or that accessing it meant defying my father's explicit warnings. "What I can promise is that we would stay true to our mission. We won't take investment from sources that would push us to compromise our principles." Dr. Michaels raised an eyebrow. "That's a luxury many startups can't afford. Beggars are rarely choosers in the funding world." "I know, but I've seen firsthand what happens when profit becomes the only consideration. I won't build another company like that." Sophia smiled. "I like your conviction. I'm in, at least to explore this further and see if we can develop a viable plan." "Me too," said Marcus. Daniel hesitated. "I need to think about it. The vision is compelling, but I want to see a more detailed roadmap before I commit." "Fair enough," I said. "Would you be willing to help us develop that roadmap?" He nodded. "Yes, I can do that." Dr. Michaels clapped her hands once. "Excellent. I suggest you start meeting regularly to flesh out the technical and business plans. Use the incubator resources, tap into the community here for feedback, and come back to me when you have something more concrete. I may be able to help with introductions to the right kind of investors when you're ready." And just like that, the core team of Terra Nova Systems began to take shape. We agreed to meet 3 times a week to develop our plans, with each of us taking responsibility for different aspects of the business. Over the next 2 months, my apartment transformed into Startup Central. The living room walls were covered with sticky notes and whiteboard panels. My dining table disappeared under stacks of research papers and prototype sketches. My refrigerator contained more takeout containers than actual groceries. The 4 of us quickly developed a rhythm. Sophia would bring insights about soil biology and sensor capabilities. Marcus would translate these into physical systems requirements for the robotics. Daniel would model how different approaches would scale and interact. And I would focus on the business model, market research, and how to position our solutions to appeal to farmers who were often conservative in their adoption of new technologies. We had our disagreements, of course. Marcus thought we should start with a single, versatile robot that could perform multiple functions. Sophia argued that the soil sensors were the foundation everything else should build upon. Daniel insisted that without the data platform to make sense of the information, neither the sensors nor the robots would deliver sufficient value. I found myself playing mediator more often than not, trying to find the common ground where all these perspectives could harmonize. In a way, it was perfect training for the integrative approach that was at the heart of Terra Nova's vision. During GAFA's one late-night session, as we debated the merits of different go-to-market strategies, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your father asks if you've come to your senses yet." I set the phone face down without responding. Sophia noticed. "Everything okay?" "Family stuff," I said dismissively. "It's nothing." She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me but wouldn't push. Later, as Marcus and Daniel packed up to leave, she lingered behind. "I couldn't help noticing your reaction to that text," she said once we were alone. "Want to talk about it?" I hesitated. I had been keeping my family situation separate from our startup discussions, partly because I didn't want my co-founders to know that my commitment to Terra Nova was as much about proving my father wrong as it was about the mission itself. But Sophia's expression was open and genuinely concerned. If we were going to build something meaningful together, there needed to be trust. "My father thinks this venture is doomed to fail," I said finally. "He wants me to join his company instead. It's a whole, complicated family legacy thing." "Ah?" She nodded knowingly. "Let me guess. He's in a traditional industry, probably manufacturing or finance. He sees what we're doing as some hippy-dippy environmental crusade with no real business potential." I laughed despite myself. "Manufacturing. And yes, that's pretty much exactly his view. My parents were the same when I decided to focus on soil microbiology instead of pursuing medical school like they wanted." She shrugged. "They came around eventually, once they saw I was serious and could actually support myself. Maybe your father will too." "I doubt it. He's very set in his ways." "Well, then we'll just have to succeed spectacularly, won't we? Nothing changes minds like results." Her confidence was infectious. For the first time since that dinner with my father, I felt completely certain that I had made the right choice. Even if Terra Nova ultimately failed, trying to build something meaningful with people who shared my values would be worth it. As the weeks passed, our plans grew more concrete. We developed a phased approach that would allow us to start with a minimum viable product, an integrated soil sensor system with basic data analytics, and then expand to more advanced features. As we secured additional funding and validated our market assumptions, Daniel, after seeing the detailed roadmap take shape, finally committed to joining full-time. "I'm still skeptical about whether we can pull off the entire vision," he admitted. "But I believe in what we're trying to do, and I want to be part of finding out if it's possible." By the end of the summer, we had a comprehensive business plan, early prototypes of Sophia's soil sensors, design specifications for Marcus's first robotic implement, and a framework for Daniel's data platform. We also had a clear understanding of the challenges ahead, the technological complexity, the conservative nature of our target market, the significant capital requirements, and the entrenched competitors who would view our approach as a threat to their business models. But we also had something that felt increasingly rare and precious, a shared purpose that transcended mere profit-seeking. We weren't just trying to build a successful company. We were trying to transform a fundamental human activity, growing food, in a way that could help address the climate crisis while ensuring food security for future generations. When we presented our refined plan to Dr. Michaels, her approval was evident in her widening smile. "This is impressive work," she said when we finished. "You've addressed the major technical and market challenges honestly, without either naive optimism or excessive pessimism. I think you're ready to take the next step." "Which is?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "Incorporation. Formal agreements among yourselves about equity and roles, and preparation for your first funding round." She held up a hand as I started to speak. "I know you're planning to bootstrap initially with your own resources, Alex. And that's wise. But you should be ready to approach the right investors once you have initial traction. I can help with those introductions when the time comes. As we left the incubator that day, the four of us paused in the parking lot, aware that we were at a significant threshold. So, I said, looking at each of them in turn, are we doing this? Sophia grinned. Hell yes. Marcus nodded firmly. All in. Daniel, ever the cautious one, took a moment longer. Yes, he said finally. Let's change agriculture. We each raised a hand for a somewhat awkward four-way high five, laughing at our own earnestness. I had found my tribe. Now it was time to build. Chapter 4. The Leaking Roof Terra Nova Systems officially incorporated in September, with the four of us as co-founders. We each contributed what we could. I put in $250,000 from my trust fund as the initial investment, while the others contributed their technical expertise and intellectual property. We split the equity 40% for me as the CEO and primary financial backer, with 20% each for my three co-founders. We rented a small warehouse space in Somerville, just outside Boston, that would serve as both our office and our workshop. The rent was higher than we had budgeted for, but we needed a space where Marcus could build and test robotic prototypes, Sophia could run soil samples through her sensor arrays, and Daniel could set up the computing infrastructure for his data models. The space was far from glamorous. The roof leaked when it rained heavily. The heating system made concerning noises during cold nights. And the previous tenant had been some kind of chemical distributor, leaving behind mysterious stains that no amount of industrial cleaning could completely eliminate. But it was ours, and we transformed it with the energy of true believers. We built workbenches from reclaimed wood, set up a small kitchen area with a donated coffee maker and microwave, and created a cozy conference room using second-hand furniture. On one wall, we painted our mission statement: healing the earth, while feeding humanity. Those early months were both exhilarating and terrifying. Each day brought new challenges, from technical obstacles that seemed insurmountable to the mundane realities of running a business, setting up payroll systems, navigating insurance requirements, and dealing with suppliers who were skeptical of our unproven startup. Money was tight from the beginning. Though my initial investment seemed substantial, it disappeared with alarming speed. Equipment for Marcus's robotics work was expensive. Sophia's specialized soil analysis tools couldn't be found at discount prices. Daniel needed computing power for his models, and all of us needed to eat and pay rent on our apartments. We implemented every cost-saving measure we could think of. We bought used equipment where possible, negotiated extended payment terms with suppliers, and took no salaries for ourselves, living off our savings. But still, the financial pressure was constant and growing. 3 months in, I found myself sitting alone in the office late at night, spreadsheets open on my laptop, trying to find ways to extend our runway. The rain drummed on the metal roof, and occasional drops fell into strategically placed buckets around the space. The rhythmic plink, plink, plink seemed to count down the minutes until we would run out of money completely. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. How are you, sweetheart? Your father mentioned Wakefield is launching a new sustainable manufacturing initiative. Thought you might be interested. I knew what this was. An olive branch, or at least the closest thing to one that my father would offer. Join the family. Business, and you can lead our token environmental program. All you have to do is abandon your own vision. For a brief, wavering moment, I considered it. The stability was tempting. The thought of calling my father, admitting he was right, and accepting a position at Wakefield Industries flashed through my mind. It would be so much easier than this daily struggle to keep Terra Nova afloat. The sound of the door opening startled me. Sophia walked in, shaking rainwater from her umbrella. What are you doing here so late? I asked, closing the spreadsheet hastily. I could ask you the same thing. She hung her wet jacket on a hook and came over to my desk. I left some cultures running and wanted to check on them before going home. She peered at my face. You look like you've seen a ghost. Just wrestling with some financial projections. She nodded toward my phone, which still displayed my mother's text. And some family pressure, it seems. I sighed. There was no point hiding it. My father's company is launching a sustainability initiative. My mother thinks I should get involved. And you're considering it? No. Yes. I don't know. I ran a hand through my hair in frustration. We're burning through cash faster than I expected. At this rate, we'll be broke in 2 months. And we're still at least 6 months away from having a product we can start testing with actual farmers. Sophia pulled up a chair and sat down. So we need more funding. That's a normal startup problem, not a reason to give up. It's not that simple. The investors Dr. Michaels has introduced us to want to see more progress before they commit. Traditional venture capital firms don't understand agriculture well enough to see the potential. And conventional agricultural investors are wedded to the chemical-intensive model we're trying to disrupt. What about grants? There are a lot of research funds available for agricultural innovation, especially related to climate resilience. Grants take time to apply for and even longer to receive if we're approved. Time we don't have. I closed my laptop. Sometimes I think my father was right. Maybe this was naive. Sophia was quiet for a moment, then stood up abruptly. Come. With me? Where? Just come. Curious despite my mood, I followed her to her lab area. She flipped on the lights and pointed to a row of planters under specialized growing lamps. Each contained small plants at various stages of growth. What am I looking at? I asked. An experiment. She pointed to the first planter. This is soil from an industrial farm in Iowa that's been under continuous corn-soybean rotation with heavy chemical inputs for decades. The plants were small and yellowish. And this, she pointed to the last planter, where vibrant green plants grew much larger, is soil from a regenerative farm in Vermont that hasn't used synthetic chemicals in 15 years. The difference is obvious, I acknowledged. Now look at these middle ones. They started with the degraded industrial soil, but I've been treating them with different combinations of our microbial amendments and monitoring them with our sensors. This one is after 1 month of treatment, this one 2 months, and this one 3 months. The progression was clear. Each successive planter showed healthier plants, moving closer to the vitality of those in the regenerative soil. This is working, Alex, not just in theory, but in actual soil with actual plants. She turned to face me directly. I didn't tell you about this experiment because I wanted to be sure before I got your hopes up. But the data from the sensors is incredibly promising. We're seeing microbial diversity increase, carbon sequestration improve, and water retention capacity grow significantly in just 3 months. For the first time in weeks, I felt a surge of genuine optimism. This could be the proof of concept we need to attract investors. Exactly. We need to document these results properly, prepare a compelling presentation, and get back out there. This is real, tangible evidence that our approach works. What about Marcus's robotics and Daniel's data platform? We need the integrated system to deliver the full value proposition. 1 step at a time. If we can demonstrate that our soil health technology works, that's a start. It addresses the most fundamental piece of regenerative agriculture, the soil itself. The other components can be developed as we secure more funding. She was right. Of course. We had been trying to build everything simultaneously, spreading our limited resources too thin. A more focused approach might be the key to survival. Thank you, I said, feeling genuinely grateful. I needed this reminder of why we're doing this in the first place. That's what co-founders are for, she smiled. Now go home and get some sleep. Tomorrow, we'll talk to Marcus and Daniel about refocusing our efforts on the soil health technology as our initial market entry. As I drove home that night, my father's skepticism seemed less intimidating. Yes, we faced enormous challenges. Yes, we might still fail, but we were creating something real, something with the potential to make a meaningful difference. That was worth fighting for, regardless of the outcome. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with the team. I was honest about our financial situation and proposed the new strategy Sophia and I had discussed. Focus primarily on the soil health monitoring system as our first product, while continuing development of the robotics and data platform at a reduced pace. To my relief, both Marcus and Daniel saw the logic in this approach. The sensors provide immediate value to farmers, Daniel noted, and the data we collect from early adopters will help refine my models for the full platform. Marcus was more reluctant but pragmatic. I don't like slowing down the robotics work, but I understand the constraints. And I can use this time to improve the designs based on what we learn from the soil sensor deployments. With our new strategy in place, we redoubled our efforts. Sophia worked tirelessly to refine her sensor technology and document the results of her soil regeneration experiments. Daniel shifted his focus to creating a simplified version of his data platform that could work specifically with the soil sensors, providing actionable insights to farmers in real time. Marcus reluctantly scaled back his robotics work, but used the opportunity to design simpler, more cost-effective implements that could integrate with existing farm equipment rather than replacing it entirely. I focused on refining our business pitch and seeking additional funding sources. Dr. Michaels came through with introductions to several potential investors who specialized in agricultural technology. Armed with Sophia's compelling experimental results, we prepared for a new round of pitches. Chapter 5. The Art of Persistence. No. The word hung in the air of the sleek conference room. Martin Grayson, managing partner at AgroVentures Capital, closed the portfolio folder I had given him and slid it back across the polished table. The soil sensor market is already crowded, he continued. What you're proposing isn't sufficiently differentiated to justify the valuation you're seeking. This was our third investor meeting of the week and the third rejection. Each had come with different reasoning, but the outcome was the same. No one was willing to bet on Terra Nova Systems just yet. With respect, Mr. Grayson, I said, fighting. To keep my voice steady, our sensors measure microbial activity and carbon sequestration in ways existing products don't, and they're just the entry point for our integrated system that will— He held up a hand. I understand your vision, Mr. Wakefield. It's ambitious, but my firm invests in proven technologies with clear paths to market, not integrated systems, that might someday transform agriculture if everything goes perfectly. He stood up, signaling that our meeting was over. Come back when you have customers and revenue, then we can talk. Outside on the street, Sophia and I walked in silence for a block before she spoke. That was brutal. And familiar, I said. We've heard some version of that from every investor we've approached. So what now? We've got about 6 weeks of runway left, by my calculation. I stopped walking and turned to face her. We need to change our approach. Investors want to see customer validation, so let's give them that. How? We don't have a finished product yet. We have functioning prototypes of the soil sensors and a basic version of the data platform. What if we offered them to a few farmers for free as part of a pilot program? We'd get valuable feedback and, assuming the results are positive, testimonials we could use with investors. Sophia considered this. It could work. But who would take a chance on unproven technology from a startup that might not exist in 2 months? I smiled for the first time that day. I have an idea about that. That evening, I made a call I'd been avoiding for months. Alex? My mother sounded surprised to hear from me. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, Mom. I actually called to ask for Uncle Peter's phone number. Peter? Why do you need to speak with him? Uncle Peter wasn't really my uncle, but my father's college roommate and the owner of a mid-sized organic farm in western Massachusetts. He had always been the black sheep in my father's social circle, choosing agriculture over a more lucrative career in finance or law. My father tolerated him with a mixture of amusement and condescension, often referring to Peter's farm as his hobby. I want to talk to him about possibly testing some of our technology on his farm. There was a pause. Your father won't like that. I'm not asking for Dad's permission, Mom. I'm asking for Peter's phone number. She sighed. He's going to find out, you know. Probably, but this is important. Another pause, then. I'll text it to you. And Alex? I hope you know what you're doing. So do I, Mom. So do I. Uncle Peter turned out to be surprisingly receptive to my proposal. He invited me to visit his farm the following weekend to discuss the details in person. Waking Roots Farm sprawled across 200 acres of rolling hills. Unlike the vast monoculture fields that dominated industrial agriculture, Peter's land was a patchwork of diverse crops, orchards, pastures, and wooded areas. It was exactly the kind of operation that could benefit from our integrated approach to regenerative farming. Peter greeted me with a bear hug when I arrived. Alex Wakefield, look at you, all grown up and starting a company. Your father must be proud. I winced. Not exactly. He thinks I'm wasting my time and money. Peter laughed. That sounds like Charles. Never could see beyond the next quarterly report. He gestured toward the fields. Come on, let me show you around while you tell me about this technology of yours. For the next 2 hours, we walked the farm as I explained Terra Nova's vision and our current focus on soil health monitoring. Peter asked insightful questions about the sensor's durability, power requirements, and data accuracy. By the time we reached the farmhouse for lunch, I could tell he was genuinely interested. So, I said as we sat down to eat, would you be willing to participate in our pilot program? We'd install the sensors across selected fields, provide you with access to the data platform, and use your feedback to refine the system. Peter spread homemade jam on a slice of bread. What's in it for me, besides helping my best friends? Wayward son? Valuable data about your soil health that you wouldn't otherwise have. Early access to technology that could eventually save you money on inputs while improving yields. And the satisfaction of supporting innovation in regenerative agriculture. He smiled. You've got a bit of your father's salesmanship in you, though I suspect you wouldn't appreciate the comparison. I've learned from watching him, even if I'm applying those lessons differently. Peter nodded thoughtfully. I'll do it, but on one condition. I want you to include at least 2 other farms in your pilot, farms that are transitioning from conventional to organic practices. That's where your technology could make the biggest difference, helping farmers through that difficult transition, period when yields often drop before the soil recovers. It was a brilliant suggestion, and exactly the kind of thinking we needed. Do you have specific farms in mind? As a matter of fact, I do. I mentor several farmers who are making that transition. 2 of them would be perfect for this pilot. By the end of the day, we had a verbal agreement for a 3-farm pilot program. Peter would make the introductions to the other farmers, and we would begin installations within 2 weeks. The mood at Terra Nova headquarters was electric when I returned with the news. For the first time in months, we had a clear path forward. That didn't depend on convincing skeptical investors. We had real-world testing sites where we could prove the value of our technology. The next 2 weeks were a frenzy of preparation. Sophia fine-tuned the sensors to ensure they would perform reliably in field conditions. Daniel optimized the data platform for the specific soil types and crop varieties at our pilot farms. Marcus, though still focused primarily on his robotics work, helped design rugged housings for the sensors that could withstand weather, wildlife, and farm equipment. Our financial situation remained precarious, but the pilot program gave us a renewed sense of purpose. We were no longer just building technology in isolation. We were creating solutions for specific farmers with real challenges. The installation days were both exhausting and exhilarating. At each farm, we carefully placed sensors across test fields, mapping their locations precisely and establishing baseline readings. We trained the farmers on how to access and interpret the data through a simple web interface Daniel had designed. Peter's farm was our flagship site, with the most extensive sensor network and the most comprehensive data collection. The other two farms, Riverbend Farm and Sunrise Fields, were smaller operations in the midst of transitioning from conventional to organic practices. Their owners, Maria Gonzalez and Tom Bradford, were cautiously optimistic about our technology, but understandably concerned about risking their livelihoods on unproven solutions. "I'm taking a big chance here," Maria told me as we installed sensors in her vegetable fields. "We're in year 2 of transition, and our yields are down nearly 30% from when we were conventional. My profit margins are razor thin. If your system doesn't help us make better decisions, I'm not sure we'll survive another year." Her words were a sobering reminder of the real stakes involved. This wasn't just about proving our technology to investors. It was about creating tools that could help farmers succeed economically while adopting more sustainable practices. "I understand," I told her. "That's why we're not charging you for this pilot. We want to prove that this works before we ask anyone to pay for it." "I appreciate that," she said, "but my time is valuable too. Learning a new system, monitoring the data, that's an investment on my part." "You're absolutely right. And I promise you, if you don't see value from this system within 3 months, we'll remove the equipment and stop taking up your time." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Let's see what your fancy sensors can tell me about my soil that my own eyes and hands can't." It was the kind of challenge we needed. Practical, grounded, and focused on delivering real value rather than just impressive technology. As we drove away from Maria's farm after completing the installation, I felt a new sense of responsibility. We weren't just building a company anymore. We were working to earn the trust of farmers who were taking significant risks to change how they grew food. Back at our headquarters, we established a new routine. Each morning began with a review of the data coming in from our pilot sites. We analyzed soil moisture levels, temperature fluctuations, microbial activity, and nutrient cycling, looking for patterns and insights that could help our farmers make better decisions. When we spotted something significant, we would call the relevant farmer immediately. "Maria, your field 3 is showing signs of nitrogen stress. You might want to apply a targeted dose of organic fertilizer before the weekend." Or, "Tom, the moisture levels in your western field are higher than optimal. You might want to hold off on irrigation for a few days." At first, the farmers were skeptical of these recommendations, but as they saw the positive results, healthier plants, reduced input costs, fewer pest problems, their skepticism gradually gave way to cautious appreciation. 6 weeks into the pilot, Peter called me with exciting news. "Your sensors picked up a fungal pathogen in my apple orchard before there were any visible symptoms. We were able to apply a preventative organic treatment that stopped it from spreading. Without that early warning, I might have lost a significant portion of my crop." It was exactly the kind of success story we needed. I asked Peter if he would be willing to provide a testimonial we could use with investors, and he readily agreed. The following week, Tom reported that the sensor data had helped him reduce his water usage by 20% while maintaining yield, and Maria noted that following our targeted fertilization recommendations had improved plant health in her problem areas. Armed with these early successes, we refined our investor pitch. Instead of leading with our grand vision of an integrated system, we focused on the concrete results from our pilot program: early detection of plant diseases, optimization of water and fertilizer use, and improved decision-making for farmers. In transition to organic practices, we positioned the soil health monitoring system as a standalone product with immediate value, while presenting the robotics and comprehensive data platform as future expansions that would build on this foundation. Dr. Michaels arranged a new round of meetings with potential investors, including some who had previously rejected us. The difference in their reception was dramatic. "These results from real farms are compelling," said Jennifer Wu of Greenseed Ventures during our third meeting of the week. "You've demonstrated that your technology addresses specific pain points for farmers, not just abstract environmental benefits." "That's been our focus," I agreed. "Finding the intersection where environmental improvements also make economic sense for the farmer." "And your customer acquisition strategy?" she asked. "We're targeting farms in transition to organic or regenerative practices first. These operations face the greatest challenges during the transition period, when yields often decrease before the soil recovers. Our system helps them navigate that difficult phase more successfully, making the economics of transition more viable." She nodded approvingly. "Smart. You're going after the customers with the most acute need. What about pricing?" "Subscription model. Farmers pay an annual fee based on acreage, which includes the sensors, access to the data platform, and regular expert consultation on interpreting the results. We've structured it so that the cost is offset by savings in water, fertilizer, and reduced crop losses." Jennifer exchanged glances with her colleague. "We'd like to continue this conversation. Can you send us your financial projections and a more detailed technical overview?" It wasn't a commitment, but it was far more positive than any investor response we'd received previously. Similar reactions came from several other firms we met with that week. By month's end, we had 3 tentative offers of investment, each with different terms and expectations. It was a far cry from the desperate situation we'd faced just 2 months earlier when our funds were nearly depleted. The team gathered in our conference room to discuss the offers. "Greenseed Ventures is offering the best terms," I explained. "They're willing to invest $1.5 million for a 20% stake, which values Terra Nova at $7.5 million pre-money." "That seems low given our progress," Marcus objected. "It's actually quite generous for our stage," Daniel countered. "Most ag-tech startups at our phase would be valued around $5 million, especially with limited revenue." "What about the other offers?" Sophia asked. "Agro Innovation Fund is offering $2 million for 30%, and Tech Harvest Partners wants $1 million for 15%, but with more restrictive terms regarding future fundraising." We debated the options for hours, weighing the financial terms against the strategic value each investor could bring. Greenseed had the strongest network in sustainable agriculture. Agro Innovation had deep pockets for future rounds. Tech Harvest had the best technical expertise that could help us refine our products. In the end, we decided to go with Greenseed Ventures. Their focus on environmental sustainability aligned with our mission, and they seemed to truly understand the transformative potential of our approach. The day we signed the term sheet, the team celebrated with champagne and plastic cups at our leaky warehouse. "To Terra Nova Systems," I toasted, raising my cup. "And to proving that doing good for the planet can also be good business." "To Terra Nova," they echoed. As we drank, I couldn't help thinking of my father. I had spent the last 8 months trying to prove him wrong, to show that my naive dream was viable. Now, we had validation from both customers and investors. Would that be enough to change his mind? I pushed the thought away. This moment wasn't about my father. It was about what we were building together. Whatever his opinion, Terra Nova had taken its first significant step toward sustainability, both environmental and financial. Chapter 6. The competition. The investment from Greenseed Ventures changed everything for Terra Nova. We moved from our leaky warehouse to a proper office and lab space in Cambridge. We hired our first employees beyond the founding team, 2 engineers to help Marcus with the robotics development, a soil scientist to work with Sophia on expanding the sensor capabilities, and a marketing specialist to help us refine our messaging to farmers. With the financial pressure temporarily relieved, we could focus on improving our products and expanding our customer base. The soil health monitoring system, now branded as TerraSense, moved from pilot to commercial release 6 months after our funding round. Our first paying customers came from the network of farmers that Peter had introduced us to, other organic and transitioning operations that had heard about the results from our pilot program. Word spread through agricultural conferences, online forums, and, most importantly, farmer-to-farmer recommendations. By the end of our first year in business, TerraSense was installed on 27 farms across New England and the Mid-Atlantic, generating modest but growing subscription revenue. The feedback from these early customers helped us continuously improve both the hardware and software components of the system. We were still far from profitable, but the trajectory was promising. Daniel's data platform was becoming increasingly sophisticated as it ingested more information from diverse farming operations. Sophia's sensor technology was proving reliable in various soil types and weather conditions. And Marcus had completed early prototypes of robotic implements designed to work with the TerraSense system, particularly for precision application of organic amendments based on the sensor data. It was at the National Sustainable Agriculture Conference in Chicago that we first encountered serious competition. I was staffing our modest booth, explaining the TerraSense system to an interested farmer from Iowa, when I noticed a much larger display across the exhibition hall. The sleek black booth with glowing green accents featured the logo of Agricor Technologies, one of the largest agricultural equipment manufacturers in the country. What caught my attention wasn't the booth itself, but the products they were showcasing: soil sensors that looked remarkably similar to our designs, paired with a data platform that promised many of the same benefits as TerraSense. After my conversation with the farmer concluded, I wandered over to the Agricor booth, trying to appear casual as I examined their offering. "Can I help you?" asked a polished representative in a company polo shirt. "Just curious about your soil monitoring system," I said. "It's new, isn't it? I don't recall seeing it at last year's conference." "Our eco-soil system is making its debut here, actually," he said with practiced enthusiasm. "It represents Agricor's commitment to sustainable farming practices. The sensors measure microbial activity, carbon sequestration, and nutrient cycling in real time, allowing farmers to make data-driven decisions that improve soil health while maintaining profitability." It was almost word for word our own marketing language. I struggled to keep my expression neutral. "Interesting. And how long has this been in development?" "Agricor has been researching regenerative agricultural technologies for several years," he replied smoothly. "The eco-soil system is the culmination of that investment, combining our expertise in farm equipment with cutting-edge soil science." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further, and moved away from the booth. My mind was racing. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Agricor had clearly accelerated development of a competing product after seeing the interest in our approach. Back at our hotel that evening, I called an emergency meeting with Sophia and Daniel, who had also attended the conference. "They've copied us," I said without preamble, pacing the small hotel room. "Agricor's new system is basically TerraSense with a bigger marketing budget." Sophia frowned. "How similar is it?" "Too similar to be a coincidence. The sensors appear to use the same basic technology as ours, though I couldn't examine them closely enough to know if they've made any significant improvements. The data visualization on their platform looks nearly identical to our interface." Daniel's expression was grim. "This is bad timing. We're just starting to gain traction, and now a major player enters with what sounds like a comparable product. Do we have any recourse?" Sophia asked. "Patents or other IP protection?" I shook my head. "We have patent applications pending, but they're still under review, and even if they were granted, litigation against a company Agricor's size would be prohibitively expensive." "So what do we do?" I stopped pacing and sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. "We need to accelerate our development roadmap. If we can't prevent them from copying what we've already built, we need to stay ahead by moving faster toward the integrated system. The soil sensors were always just the first component. Our advantage is that we've been working on the full vision from the beginning. Daniel looked skeptical. Accelerating development requires more engineers, more testing, more of everything, including money. We'd need to raise another round sooner than planned. Then that's what we'll do, I said firmly. But first, I want to learn more about Agricore's system. We need to understand exactly what we're up against. The next day, I returned to Agricore's booth with a specific mission. This time, I presented myself as a farmer interested in the Bai eco-soil system, asking detailed technical questions and requesting a full demonstration. The more I learned, the more concerned I became. Their system was indeed remarkably similar to ours in functionality, though their sensors appeared slightly less sensitive to certain microbial markers that Sophia had identified as particularly important. Their data platform was polished, but lacked some of the predictive capabilities that Daniel had built into ours. However, Agricore had two significant advantages: an established distribution network through their existing dealer relationships, and the financial resources to offer the system at a price point that would be difficult for us to match while maintaining margins. As I walked away from their booth, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We should talk. Meet me at the Starbucks across from the convention center at 4 p.m. James Chen, Agricore R&D. I stared at the message in surprise. James Chen was Agricore's Director of Research and Development, according to their website. Why would he want to meet with me? Curiosity overcame caution, and at 4 p.m. I found myself sitting in the corner of the crowded Starbucks, watching the door. A few minutes later, a middle-aged Asian man in a well-tailored suit entered, scanned the room, and walked directly to my table. Alex Wakefield? James Chen. He offered his hand, which I shook automatically, still confused by this unexpected meeting. "How did you get my number?" I asked as he sat down. He smiled faintly. "Agricore has resources, but that's not important. What matters is that I wanted to speak with you directly, outside the corporate setting." "About what?" "About Terra Nova Systems and what Agricore's entry into your market means for your company." I stiffened. "If this is some kind of intimidation tactic?" "Not at all," he interrupted smoothly. "Quite the opposite, in fact. I'm here to discuss the possibility of acquisition." The word hung in the air between us. Acquisition. Agricore wanted to buy Terra Nova. "We're not for sale," I said automatically. "Everyone is for sale at the right price, Mr. Wakefield, and Agricore is prepared to be quite generous. Your technology is impressive, especially given your limited resources and time in the market. We believe it would complement our existing product lines very well." My mind raced through the implications. If Agricore bought Terra Nova, our technology would reach far more farms much faster than we could manage on our own. That would advance our environmental mission. But would Agricore maintain the regenerative philosophy at the core of our approach? Or would they extract the most commercially viable elements and discard the rest? "Why buy us when you've already copied our core technology?" I asked bluntly. Chen didn't flinch at the accusation. "Let's call it parallel development. But your team has expertise that would take us years to replicate internally, particularly in the integration of soil monitoring with robotics and predictive analytics. That's what interests us most. The full system you're working toward, not just the sensors you've commercialized so far." So, they knew about our long-term roadmap, too. I wondered how much information had leaked from our investor presentations or customer discussions. "I appreciate your interest," I said carefully. "But Terra Nova isn't ready to consider acquisition offers at this stage. We've just begun to execute on our vision." Chen nodded as if he'd expected this response. "I understand, but the agricultural technology landscape is about to become much more competitive. Agricore will be investing heavily in this area. If not acquisition, perhaps we could discuss a strategic partnership. Access to our distribution network could accelerate your growth significantly." The offer was tempting, but I sensed a trap. A partnership with Agricor would make us dependent on their infrastructure and potentially limit our ability to pursue our more radical innovations. I'll discuss it with my team, I said noncommittally. But for now, I think we'll continue on our independent path. As you wish. Chen stood and handed me his business card. My direct line is on the back. When you're ready to have a more substantive conversation, call me directly. No need to go through corporate channels. After he left, I sat in the coffee shop for a long time, turning his card over in my hands. The meeting had clarified 2 things. Agricor saw us as enough of a threat to try to neutralize us through acquisition, and they were specifically interested in our integrated approach, not just the sensors they had already replicated. That gave us leverage, but also painted a target on our backs. If we rejected their overtures, they might use their vast resources to accelerate their own development of similar integrated systems, potentially rendering our technological lead temporary. When I returned to our booth, Sophia was waiting anxiously. "Where have you been? We have potential customers waiting to speak with you." "I just had a very interesting meeting with Agricor's R&D director," I said quietly. "I'll tell you all about it later. For now, let's focus on the farmers who are actually interested in what we're building." The rest of the conference passed in a blur of demonstrations, technical discussions, and networking. Despite the shadow cast by Agricor's competing product, we generated solid leads from farmers genuinely interested in TerraSense. Many were smaller operations that wouldn't typically be Agricor's target market, which suggested there might be room for both products in the diverse agricultural landscape. On the flight back to Boston, I finally had a chance to brief Sophia and Daniel fully on my meeting with James Chen. "Acquisition?" Sophia's eyes widened. "Already? We've barely gotten started." "It's a defensive move," Daniel said thoughtfully. "They see the potential threat we pose to their traditional business model. Better to absorb us than compete with us." "Exactly," I agreed. "And I think we should decline, at least for now. We have a unique vision that could be compromised under Agricor's ownership." "But their resources and reach?" Sophia mused. "We could potentially help many more farmers transition to regenerative practices if we had access to Agricor's distribution network." "At what cost, though?" I countered. "Would Agricor maintain our commitment to holistic, regenerative approaches, or would they cherry-pick the most profitable elements and discard the rest? Remember, this is a company that has historically profited from industrial agriculture." The 3 of us debated the pros and cons throughout the flight. By the time we landed, we had reached a tentative consensus. We would continue independently for now, but remain open to potential partnerships that didn't compromise our core mission. Back at Terra Nova headquarters, we shared the news about Agricor's competing product with Marcus and the rest of the team. The reaction was a mixture of concern and determination. "We need to move faster," Marcus insisted. "My robotics team is ready to integrate more closely with the sensor network. We can demonstrate field applications that Agricor won't be able to match for at least a year." The emergence of a powerful competitor created a new urgency within Terra Nova. Our roadmap, which had been somewhat flexible, now had firm timelines and deliverables. We needed to showcase the advantages of our integrated approach before Agricor could close the gap. Over the next 3 months, we worked at a feverish pace. Sophia's team enhanced the sensitivity and durability of the TerraSense sensors. Daniel's group added new predictive models to the data platform that could forecast how different interventions would affect soil health over time. Marcus accelerated development of a lightweight robotic implement that could apply organic amendments with precision based on the sensor data. We also intensified our marketing efforts, emphasizing the aspects of our system that differentiated it from Agricor's offering, our focus on microbial health rather than just chemical composition, our predictive analytics that considered long-term soil regeneration, and our commitment to practices that sequestered carbon as a primary goal rather than an ancillary benefit. Our customer base continued to grow, though more slowly than before. Agricore's entry into the market. Some potential customers who might have chosen TerraSense now opted for the EcoSoil system, either because of brand familiarity or aggressive pricing. But we also found unexpected allies. Some of the more progressive farmers actively preferred to work with a smaller company dedicated exclusively to regenerative practices rather than a large corporation with a mixed environmental record. Environmental organizations began to recommend Terra Nova specifically in their sustainable farming guidance. 6 months after the conference, we were ready to unveil the next phase of our system. Terra Nova Precision, which combined the soil monitoring capabilities of TerraSense with Marcus's robotic implements to automatically apply organic amendments, compost teas, and beneficial microorganisms exactly where and when they were needed. We arranged for a demonstration day at Peter's farm, inviting current customers, prospective clients, agricultural journalists, and even representatives from various environmental NGOs. The event would showcase the integrated system in action, demonstrating how the sensors detected specific soil conditions and the robots responded with precise interventions. The day before the demonstration, I received another text from James. Chen. Heard about your event tomorrow. Impressed by how quickly you've integrated the robotics. Our offer still stands. In fact, it's now more generous. I didn't respond. Chen's message only confirmed that we were on the right track. Agricore was watching us closely, which meant they recognized the value of what we were building. The demonstration day dawned clear and mild, perfect weather for an outdoor technology showcase. Peter's farm had been transformed with information stations, demonstration plots, and a central tent where Daniel's team had set up screens showing the data platform in action. As attendees arrived, I felt a surge of pride in what we had accomplished in just over a year and a half since Terra Nova's founding. From a leaky warehouse and desperate financial straits to this professional operation with growing customer validation, we had come further than even I had dared to hope. The demonstration itself went flawlessly. Sophia explained how the sensors detected a patch of soil with suboptimal fungal to bacterial ratio, a key indicator of soil health in regenerative systems. The data platform displayed this information in real time, and then the robotic implement moved precisely to the affected area, applying a carefully calibrated dose of fungally dominated compost tea. The farmers in attendance were visibly impressed, particularly when Peter shared data showing how his crop yields had improved since implementing our system, while his input costs had decreased significantly. The key difference between Terra Nova and other soil monitoring systems, I explained during my presentation, is that we're not just providing data, we're providing actionable intelligence and the means to act on it precisely. This closed-loop system constantly learns and adapts, becoming more effective over time as it gathers more data about your specific land. After the formal presentations, as attendees mingled and examined the equipment up close, I noticed a familiar figure standing at the edge of the gathering. My father, Charles Wakefield Sr., was watching the proceedings with an unreadable expression. My first reaction was anger. Who had invited him? Was he here to gloat if something went wrong? But as our eyes met across the crowd, I realized that his presence might actually be an opportunity. Despite everything, a part of me still wanted him to understand what I was trying to build, not for his approval, necessarily, but for him to see that there were viable business models beyond the extractive approach he had always championed. I made my way toward him, nodding and smiling at attendees as I passed. "Dad," I said when I reached him, "I'm surprised to see you here." "Peter invited me," he said simply. "He thought I might be interested in seeing what you've accomplished." Of course. Uncle Peter, the eternal optimist, still believed that father and son could find common ground. "And? What do you think?" I tried to keep my tone neutral, though my heart was racing. My father surveyed the scene before answering. "It's more substantial than I expected," he admitted finally. "Your sensor technology seems genuinely innovative. and the integration with the robotics is clever. Coming from him, this was high praise indeed. I waited, sensing there was more. But, he continued, Agricore's entry into this market changes everything. You know that, don't you? They can outspend you, outsell you, and eventually out-innovate you. They have resources you can't match as an independent company. And there it was, the criticism I'd been bracing for. We're not trying to compete with Agricore on all fronts, I said. We're focused on serving farmers who are fully committed to regenerative practices, not just making incremental improvements to conventional agriculture. A niche market, he said dismissively. A growing market, I countered, and one with significant environmental impact. Every acre that transitions from conventional to regenerative practices represents meaningful carbon sequestration and biodiversity enhancement. He shook his head slightly. You still believe you can save the world and make a profit simultaneously. That's not how business works, Alex. With respect, Dad, I think that's exactly how business needs to work in the 21st century. The old model of profit at any environmental cost is becoming increasingly untenable. Companies that find ways to align financial and ecological benefits will have the advantage going forward. My father didn't respond immediately. He watched as Marcus demonstrated the precision of the robotic implement to an attentive group of farmers. You turned down an acquisition offer from Agricore, he said finally. It wasn't a question. News traveled fast in business circles, apparently. Yes, we're not ready to give up control of our vision. Brave or foolish, time will tell. He turned to me fully. But I will say this. You've built something real here. Something with actual market value. That surprises me, Elena. I didn't think you had it in you. Coming from my father, this qualified as effusive praise. I felt a momentary flush of pride before reminding myself that his approval wasn't what I was after. Not anymore. We're just getting started, I said, watching as Marcus fielded questions from the crowd. Our prototype harvester moved with elegant precision through the demonstration field, identifying ripe produce and gently collecting it without bruising. 3 years of work, countless failures, and sleepless nights had led to this moment. Father nodded slowly, his expression unreadable behind his designer sunglasses. Robert Harrington III had built Harrington Agricultural Solutions into a billion-dollar corporation through sheer force of will and cutthroat business tactics. He'd expected me to follow in his footsteps at Haas, not break away to start my own agricultural technology company with my college roommate. Agricore will be back, he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen countless startups rise and fall. With a lower offer and more demands. They don't like being told no. I'm aware of how corporate acquisitions work, Dad. He almost smiled. Almost. Of course you are. Harvard Business School's finest. He glanced at his watch, a habit ingrained from decades of tightly scheduled meetings. Your mother sends her regards. She wanted to come, but the Foundation's annual gala planning is in full swing. The familiar disappointment settled in my chest. My mother had always been too busy with her charitable endeavors to attend anything related to my work. I wondered if she would have made time if I'd stayed at Harrington. Please tell her the invitation remains open. I gestured toward the demonstration. We'll be here all week. As the harvester completed its run, applause broke out among the farmers. I saw genuine interest in their faces, not just polite attention. These were the people who mattered, the ones who would actually use our technology, not venture capitalists or corporate executives who saw agriculture as merely another sector for disruption. You know, my father said, his voice softer now, your grandfather would have appreciated this approach. Before we scaled, he was adamant that every product needed to be tested by real farmers under real conditions. The mention of my grandfather, a man I barely remembered but whose legacy loomed large in our family, caught me off guard. My father rarely spoke of him, especially in relation to business. I didn't know that, I admitted. There's a lot you don't know about the early days of Harrington. He straightened his already impeccable tie. Perhaps we should have dinner while I'm in town, just the two of us. Before I could respond, Marcus bounded over, his face flushed with excitement. At 6'4", with perpetually disheveled hair, and today wearing our company polo that was already stained with what looked like engine grease, my business partner and best friend made for a stark contrast to my father's polished appearance. "Mr. Harrington, glad you could make it." Marcus extended his hand, either oblivious to or unbothered by my father's intimidating reputation. "What did you think of the demo?" My father shook his hand firmly. "Impressive precision on the tomato collection. Your navigation algorithm seems robust." Marcus beamed at the technical observation. "Thank you. We've been refining the visual recognition system for months. It can now distinguish between 8 stages of ripeness across 22 crop varieties." Interesting. My father actually sounded like he meant it. And the battery life? 14 hours of continuous operation, and we're working on solar panels for the storage unit to extend that even further. As they delved into technical specifications, I found myself watching the farmers who were now approaching the harvester, running their weathered hands along its frame, peering at the collection baskets. Their approval meant more than any venture capital funding or acquisition offer. "Elena." My father's voice pulled me back to the conversation. "Marcus was just telling me about your pilot program with the cooperative." "Yes," I said, grateful. For a topic I could discuss with genuine passion. "We're partnering with 12 family farms across 3 counties. They'll use our harvesters for the full growing season, providing real-world feedback before we scale production." "Small scale," my father noted, though his tone wasn't dismissive. "Intentionally so," I countered. "We want to perfect the technology, with farmers who have a stake in its success, not rush to market with something that breaks down when it hits the first unexpected obstacle." My subtle dig at Harrington's occasionally hasty product launches didn't escape him, but he let it pass. "A methodical approach has its merits." He checked his watch again. "I should be going. I have a meeting with the governor's agricultural advisor this afternoon." Of course he did. My father's influence extended far beyond his company's bottom line. "Thank you for coming," I said formally, unsure if I should hug him or shake his hand. We settled for an awkward moment of hesitation, followed by a brief, stiff embrace. "About dinner," he said as he pulled away. "Tomorrow night? The Oak Room at 8? I nodded, surprised by my own anticipation. "I'll be there." As his driver pulled away in a gleaming black sedan, Marcus sidled up beside me. "So, that was the legendary Robert Harrington in the flesh. Slightly less terrifying than you've described. Don't be fooled. He's assessing everything, including you." "And? Did I pass muster?" I smiled despite myself. "He asked you technical questions and actually listened to your answers. For my father, that's practically a declaration of respect." Marcus grinned. "I'll take it." His expression turned more serious. "But the real question is, what did the farmers think?" We turned toward the demonstration field where several farmers were still examining the harvester, engaged in animated conversation with our engineers. "Let's find out," I said, striding toward them with Marcus at my side. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of technical discussions, farmer feedback, and planning sessions with our team. By the time we returned to our makeshift office in a converted barn on the edge of the demonstration farm, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the fields. "Quite a day," Marcus said, collapsing into his chair and propping his feet, up on a desk cluttered with circuit boards and design sketches. "I think we've got the Richardson brothers convinced. Their tomato operation would be perfect for our first commercial deployment." I nodded, scanning through emails on my tablet. "And the Johnsons seemed interested too, especially in the customizable settings for different varieties. Did you see Old Man Peterson's face when the harvester navigated around that unexpected irrigation pipe?" I thought he was going to propose marriage to the machine right there. I laughed, remembering the weathered farmer's look of astonishment. We still need to address the feedback about the collection baskets. Several people mentioned they need to be more easily detachable for immediate transport to cold storage. Already on it, Marcus said, pulling up design schematics on his computer. I've got some ideas for a quick release mechanism that won't compromise stability. This was why we worked so well together. While I handled the business strategy, investor relations, and client management, Marcus's engineering brilliance brought our vision to life. We'd met during our first year at MIT, me studying agricultural economics while simultaneously completing Harvard Business School requirements through a joint program, him deep in robotics engineering. A chance conversation about the inefficiencies in harvesting delicate produce had sparked a friendship and, eventually, agritech innovations. Any word from Venture Harvest about the Series B funding? Marcus asked, not looking up from his designs. I hesitated. They're still interested, but they're concerned about Agricor's position in the market. Apparently, our rejection of their offer has raised some eyebrows. Let them raise their eyebrows all they want. We're not building this company just to hand it over to some conglomerate that will strip mine the technology and double the price to farmers. Agreed, I said firmly. But we do need to secure that funding if we're going to meet production goals for next season. Marcus finally looked up, his expression serious. What about your trust fund? I know you've been avoiding touching it, but no. My response came out sharper than intended. Sorry, but no. I need to do this without family money. You know that. He nodded, understanding the complicated relationship I had with my family's wealth. I'd used some of my personal savings from my 2 years at Harrington to help launch Agritech, but I'd drawn a firm line at tapping into the substantial trust fund my grandparents had established for me. That felt too much like relying on the very safety net I was trying to prove I didn't need. Just checking, he said easily. In that case, we should probably prepare for another presentation to Venture Harvest. Really emphasize the market differentiation and the loyalty we're building with these farming cooperatives. I'll start working on it tomorrow. I yawned, suddenly aware of how long the day had been. But right now, I need sleep. And so do you. The Sullivan Farm demonstration is at 8 a.m. sharp, Marcus made a face. Why do farmers insist on starting so early? Something about the sun rising and crops growing, I teased, gathering my things. See you in the morning. As I drove back to my rented farmhouse a few miles away, I found my thoughts drifting to the upcoming dinner with my father. In the 3 years since I'd left Harrington Agricultural Solutions to start Agritech, our relationship had been strained at best, non-existent at worst. His appearance at the demonstration today represented the most interest he'd shown in my venture since its inception. What did he really want? Was this genuine curiosity about my business, or was there some strategic angle I wasn't seeing? With my father, there was always a calculation, always a move being made several steps ahead. I pulled into the gravel driveway of the century-old farmhouse I'd been renting from a retired couple who'd moved to Florida. The wraparound porch and weathered wood siding couldn't have been more different from the sleek downtown condo I'd occupied during my Harrington days, but I'd grown to love the creaky floors and spectacular sunrises visible from my bedroom window. Inside, I kicked off my boots and poured a glass of wine, then stepped out onto the back porch. The night was clear, stars visible in a way they never were in the city. In the distance, I could make out the silhouettes of my neighbors' crops, the very fields our technology was designed to nurture and harvest more efficiently. My phone buzzed with a text from Layla, our operations manager. Great job today, boss. The farmers are talking, in a good way. I smiled, typing back a quick thanks and acknowledgement of her crucial role in organizing the demonstration. A second message came through as I was about to set the phone down, this one from my father. Reservation confirmed for tomorrow. Come. Prepared to discuss Agricor's history of post-acquisition management. might be relevant to your situation. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Was he suggesting Agricor would make another attempt? Did he have inside information? Or was he trying to convince me that an acquisition might be in Agritech's best interest after all? With my father, simple dinners were never just about food and conversation. They were strategic engagements, opportunities to advance an agenda. I'd learned that lesson well during my time at Harrington. Setting the phone aside, I took a long sip of wine and tried to refocus on the day's successes. Whatever my father's motivations, I had a company to run and a vision to fulfill. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and, apparently, a high-stakes dinner with Robert Harrington III. I just had to remember what Marcus and I had promised each other when we founded Agritech. We would build something meaningful, something that served the needs of real people working the land, not the insatiable appetite of corporate shareholders for ever-increasing returns. If my father couldn't understand that difference in priorities, that was his limitation, not mine. At least, that's what I told myself as I gazed up at the stars, trying to quiet the persistent voice of doubt that still whispered I'd never measure up to the Harrington legacy. The Sullivan Farm demonstration the next morning went even better than expected. Their operation, primarily berries and tree fruits, presented different challenges than yesterday's tomato fields. But our harvester adapted beautifully with only minor adjustments. By noon, we had 3 more farms signed up for the pilot program and a list of thoughtful feedback points for our engineering team. We're going to need more units for the pilot than we originally planned, I told Marcus as we packed up our equipment. I'll talk to production about accelerating the timeline. Production is me and 4 engineering students in a renovated barn, he reminded me with a grin. But I take your point. I'll see if we can bring on a couple more hands for the summer. Do it, I agreed. Use some of the funds from the Clement Foundation grant. This is exactly what that money was intended for, scaling to meet genuine market demand. Marcus nodded, then glanced at his watch. Don't you have that dinner with your father tonight? Shouldn't you be getting ready or something? I laughed. It's barely noon. The dinner's at 8. Yeah, but doesn't preparing to verbally spar with Robert Harrington require, meditation and power poses and maybe some light armor? He wasn't entirely wrong. I'll head back around 4. That gives me plenty of time to review the latest market analysis on Agricor's acquisition patterns and still shower off the farm dust. That's my boss, he said with mock seriousness, always prepared for battle. After finalizing plans for tomorrow's demonstration at the cooperative's main facility, I headed back to the farmhouse. Despite my casual response to Marcus, I was feeling the pressure of the upcoming dinner. My relationship with my father had always been complicated, a mix of deep respect for his business acumen, frustration with his emotional distance, and a desperate desire for his approval that I'd never fully outgrown despite my best efforts. At the farmhouse, I spent an hour reviewing Agricor's recent business activities. As one of the largest agricultural technology companies in the world, they had a pattern of acquiring innovative startups, integrating their technology into the Agricor ecosystem, and gradually phasing out the original leadership team. Sometimes, the acquired technology flourished. Other times it seemed to disappear entirely, buried under corporate bureaucracy or shelved in favor of competing internal projects. Their interest in Agritech made business sense. Our precision harvesting technology would complement their existing planting and irrigation systems. A farmer could potentially use Agricor products through the entire growing cycle. The synergy was obvious, but Marcus and I had built Agritech with a different philosophy. We believed in collaborating directly with farmers, in transparent pricing, in technology that adapted to existing farm operations rather than forcing operations to adapt to the technology. Agricor's top-down approach ran counter to everything we valued. After showering and changing into one of the few business outfits I'd brought from my previous life, a charcoal gray pantsuit with a silk blouse, I headed to the Oak Room, the most upscale restaurant in the county. It was the kind of place local Farmers visited perhaps once a year for anniversary celebrations, while wealthy landowners and business executives were regular fixtures. My father was already seated when I arrived, nursing what appeared to be a scotch on the rocks. He stood as I approached, his posture as impeccable as ever. "Elena, you look well." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Country air agrees. With you, apparently." "Thank you. It's good to see you too, Dad." I settled into my seat, noting that he'd already ordered a bottle of Pinot Noir, my preferred wine. A small but thoughtful detail. After the waiter poured my glass and took our orders, my father leaned back slightly, studying me with the same analytical gaze he used when evaluating a potential acquisition. "Your demonstration yesterday was impressive," he said finally. "Particularly, the adaptability of the harvester to uneven terrain. That's been a significant challenge in automated harvesting. Marcus deserves most of the credit for that. He developed a flexible suspension system that allows real-time adjustments based on multiple sensor inputs." My father nodded. "He's clearly talented, as are you." He took a sip of his scotch. "Your market positioning is smart, focusing on the small to mid-sized operations that the major players often overlook." I tried not to show my surprise at the compliment. "We believe there's significant untapped potential in that segment. They need the efficiency of automation but can't afford the massive systems designed for industrial operations. And they appreciate the personal touch, the sense that you understand their specific challenges." He nodded. "It's a valid strategy." The conversation paused as our appetizers arrived. A charcuterie board to share. Another detail that suggested my father had given some thought to this dinner. I remembered mentioning my fondness for artisanal cheeses during one of our few civil conversations shortly before I left Harrington. "You mentioned Agricor," I said, deciding to address the elephant in the room directly. "Your text suggested you have information about their acquisition practices." A hint of approval flickered across his face. He'd always appreciated directness. "I've known Gerald Porter, their CEO, for 20 years. Played golf with him last month, in fact." Of course he had. My father's network within the agricultural industry was unparalleled. "Their initial offer to you was generous on paper," he continued, selecting a piece of aged Gouda from the board. "But their standard acquisition agreement contains several clauses that would effectively give them complete control of your technology within 18 months, regardless of the leadership transition timeline they promise publicly." I set down my wine glass carefully. "And you know this how exactly?" "I've reviewed 3 such agreements over the past 2 years. Different companies, nearly identical language." He met my gaze directly. "They approached Harrington about acquiring our irrigation division last year." This was news to me. "You turned them down." "We did. The financial terms were attractive, but the strategic implications were unacceptable." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm telling you this not to influence your decision. You've already made that clear, but to confirm that your instincts were correct. Agricor doesn't partner. They absorb." I processed this information, trying to identify my father's angle. Was this simply a professional courtesy from one business leader to another? Or was there more to it? "Thank you for the insight," I said carefully. "It's valuable to have confirmation from someone with direct experience. Consider it a small contribution to your market intelligence." He selected another cheese. "Now, tell me more about this cooperative pilot program. It's an interesting approach to product validation." For the next half hour, I found myself engaged in a surprisingly normal business conversation with my father. He asked thoughtful questions about our technology, our market strategy, and our funding situation. I answered honestly, finding it refreshing to discuss agritech with someone who understood the industry at a granular level. Our main courses arrived, steak for him, salmon for me. And as we ate, the conversation shifted. "Your mother asked me to invite you to the Foundation's summer gala," he said, cutting his steak with precision. It's on the 15th of next month. I hesitated. The Harrington Foundation's galas were lavish affairs, populated by the social and business elite my parents circulated among. My last appearance at one, shortly after announcing my departure from Harrington Agricultural Solutions, had been uncomfortable to say the least. I appreciate the invitation, but we'll be in the middle of the pilot program then. I can't really step away. My father nodded, neither disappointed nor relieved. She'll understand. The foundation is funding some interesting agricultural sustainability projects this year, by the way. Might be worth looking into for potential synergies with your technology. I'll check their website, I promised, knowing I probably wouldn't. The foundation, while doing important work, represented another extension of the Harrington Empire, another entity built on my family's name and wealth. As we finished our meal and declined dessert in favor of coffee, my father finally addressed what I suspected was the real purpose of this dinner. Elena, I won't pretend to fully understand your decision to leave Harrington. You were on track for a leadership position, possibly even succession planning. I resisted the urge to interrupt with all the reasons I'd found that path suffocating. He continued before I could respond. However, seeing what you've built with Agritech... He paused, seeming to carefully choose his words. It's clear you've found your own way to make an impact in the industry, different from mine but no less significant. I stared at him, unable to hide my shock. In all my years seeking his approval, I'd never heard him acknowledge the legitimacy of a path different from his own. Thank you. I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. That means more than you might realize. He nodded once, a businessman concluding a transaction. There's something else I wanted to discuss, a potential opportunity. Here it was, the business angle I'd been expecting. Harrington is establishing a new division focused on integrated growing systems for small to mid-sized operations. He set his coffee cup down precisely. There could be strategic advantages to a formal partnership between Harrington and Agritech. Not an acquisition, but a collaborative venture combining our irrigation technology with your harvesting innovations. I tried to process what he was suggesting. A partnership with Harrington would provide immediate access to resources, distribution channels, and market credibility that would otherwise take years to build. But it would also mean working within the Harrington ecosystem again, dealing with my father as a business partner. I'm not asking for an answer now, he added, perhaps sensing my internal conflict. It's merely a concept at this stage. Think about it, discuss it with Marcus, and we can explore the details if you're interested. I will, I promised, meaning it despite my reservations. It's an intriguing possibility. My father signaled for the check, smoothly handing over his credit card when it arrived, despite my half-hearted attempt to pay. Some battles weren't worth fighting. As we walked out of the restaurant into the warm evening air, he surprised me, again by asking, "Would you be willing to give me a more detailed tour of your facilities tomorrow? I'd like to understand your operation more thoroughly before we discuss partnership possibilities further." Of course, I agreed, oddly pleased by his interest. Is 9 too early? 9 is perfect. He extended his hand formally, then seemed to reconsider and briefly embraced me instead. Thank you for dinner, Elena. It was enlightening. As his car pulled away, I stood for a moment under the restaurant's awning, trying to make sense of the evening. My father had been almost human, respectful of my work, open to my perspective, even supportive in his own reserved way. Could people change? Even Robert Harrington III? Or was this merely a new strategy, a different approach to bringing me back into the fold now that direct pressure had failed? I didn't have answers, only questions, and a growing sense that the lines between my past and future were blurring in ways I hadn't anticipated. As I drove back to the farmhouse, I wondered what Marcus would make of all this. Both the validation from my father and the potentially game-changing partnership proposal. Tomorrow would bring a new set of challenges, showing my father our operation, while maintaining appropriate boundaries, preparing for another demonstration, and somehow finding time to process what a Harrington partnership might mean for Agritech's future. For tonight, though, I allowed myself to savor what felt like a small victory. I had faced my father as an equal, a fellow business leader, and he had, at least outwardly, accepted me as such. It was progress, however complicated. I woke. Before dawn the next morning, my mind still churning with thoughts of my father's partnership proposal. The idea had merit from a purely business perspective. Harrington's irrigation systems were industry-leading, and integration with our harvesting technology could create a powerful end-to-end solution for farmers. But the personal implications were more complex. Working with my father would inevitably blur the boundaries I'd fought hard to establish. And what would it mean for Agritech's identity? We'd built our reputation on being farmer-focused and independent, an alternative to the corporate giants like Harrington and Agricor. As the first hints of sunrise colored the sky, I took my coffee out to the porch, watching as the landscape gradually emerged from darkness. The rolling fields, the distant tree line, the weathered barns. This was the world we were building technology to serve, not the sterile boardrooms and balance sheets of corporate agriculture. My phone buzzed, with a text from Marcus, heading to the barn early to prep for the big tour. Should I wear a tie to impress the Harrington patriarch? Asking for a friend. I smiled, typing back. Only if you want him to think you've been body snatched. Be yourself. I'll fill you in on some interesting developments when I get there. By 8:30, I was pulling into the gravel lot beside our converted barn headquarters. Marcus was already there, along with Layla and two of our engineering interns. The space was tidier than usual, I noticed. Circuit boards organized, workbenches cleared, even the perpetually overflowing recycling bin had been emptied. We didn't want your dad thinking we run some kind of chaotic startup cliché, Layla explained, following my gaze. Though I drew the line at hiding all the evidence that we occasionally eat and sleep here. He's not a venture capital investor we're trying to impress, I reminded her, though I appreciated the effort. He's here to evaluate potential synergies between our technologies. Marcus looked up from the harvester he was tinkering with. Synergies? That sounds ominously corporate. What exactly happened at dinner last night? I filled them in quickly on my father's proposal for a strategic partnership between Harrington and Agritech. As expected, Marcus had questions. Partnership meaning what exactly? They distribute our tech? We integrate their systems? We become a subsidiary in all but name? All to be determined, I admitted. This is just an initial exploration. Nothing's decided. But you're considering it, Layla observed, studying my face. After all your talk about staying independent, I'm evaluating a business opportunity, I clarified, though her observation hit home. Just as I'd evaluate any potential strategic partnership. If it doesn't make sense for Agritech's mission and long-term goals, we walk away. The sound of tires on gravel announced my father's arrival, cutting short any further discussion. We watched through the open barn doors as his driver pulled up in a more modest vehicle than yesterday, a high-end SUV rather than the executive sedan. My father emerged wearing what for him constituted casual attire, pressed khakis, a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled precisely to mid-forearm, and leather loafers that probably cost more than our monthly utility bills. Still, I appreciated the gesture toward informality in the farm setting. Good morning, I greeted him, stepping outside. Thank you for coming. He nodded, surveying the converted barn with interest. Resourceful use of existing infrastructure. Keeps overhead low while you're scaling. Exactly, I agreed, leading him inside. Dad, you've met Marcus briefly. This is Layla Ortiz, our operations manager, and Jake and Priya, two of our engineering interns from State University's Agricultural Engineering program. My father shook hands with each of them, asking surprisingly thoughtful questions about their roles and backgrounds. When he learned that Priya was focusing her graduate research on water conservation and precision agriculture, he mentioned a Harrington research initiative in a related area and promised to connect her with the lead scientist. "Let me show you what we're working on," I said, guiding him toward our main prototype. As Marcus and I walked him through the technical specifications and design philosophy of our harvester, I was struck by how attentively he listened, asking questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than mere politeness. "The modular collection baskets are clever," he noted, examining the quick-release mechanism Marcus had designed. "Allows for immediate transfer to cold storage without damaging delicate produce. Have you considered applications beyond fruits and vegetables?" "We've done some preliminary testing with seed crops," Marcus said. "The precision is actually even better there, but we're focused on the fresh produce market first since that's where manual harvesting is most labor-intensive and prone to product loss." My father nodded, jotting something in a small notebook he'd pulled from his pocket. "Smart market entry strategy. Solve the most painful problem first." The tour continued to our testing area, where we demonstrated the harvester's capabilities. On a small plot of strawberry plants we maintained for continuous development. Then to our modest fabrication area, where components were assembled and tested before field deployment. Throughout it all, my father asked insightful questions about everything from component sourcing to quality control procedures. It was like being back in the Harrington boardroom during product reviews. Except here I was the one presenting the innovation rather than evaluating someone else's. "Your operation is lean but impressive," he said as we concluded the indoor portion of the tour. "You've accomplished a remarkable amount with limited resources. We've been fortunate to attract talented people who believe in what we're building," I replied, nodding toward Marcus and Layla, who were preparing one of the harvesters for a field demonstration. "That's not fortune, Elena. That's leadership." His matter-of-fact tone made the compliment all the more surprising. "You've created something people want to be part of. Don't undervalue that skill." Before I could respond to this unexpected praise, Marcus called over that the harvester was ready for the field demonstration. We headed outside, where a small test plot of various vegetables provided a perfect demonstration environment. As the harvester moved methodically through rows of ripe tomatoes, my father observed its movements with a critical eye. "The navigation is impressively precise. How does it handle unexpected obstacles?" "Watch this," Marcus said with barely contained excitement, tossing a small branch into the harvester's path. The machine paused, its sensors evaluating the obstacle. After a moment, its articulated arm extended, gently moved the branch aside, and then continued its harvesting path. "Adaptive problem-solving," my father remarked. "That's a significant advancement over current market offerings." "It can distinguish between different types of obstacles," I explained. "Plants it should harvest, plants it should leave alone, inanimate objects it can move, and obstacles it needs to navigate around. The algorithm improves over time, too," Marcus added. "Machine learning components allow it to get more efficient with each harvest cycle." My father watched the demonstration for several more minutes before turning to me. "I'd like to discuss the partnership possibility in more concrete terms. Do you have somewhere we could talk privately?" I led him to my small office at the back of the barn, really just a partitioned space with a desk, computer, and a couple of chairs. Through the window, we could see the test field where the demonstration continued. "I've given some thought to what a collaboration between Harrington and Agritech might look like," my father began once we were seated. "The most logical approach would be an integrated system combining our precision irrigation with your harvesting technology. Integration at the product level, not the corporate level," I clarified. "Correct. Both companies would maintain their independence while developing compatible systems and potentially creating new joint offerings." He placed his notebook on the desk between us. "Harrington would provide manufacturing support, distribution channels, and marketing resources. Agritech would continue to drive innovation in harvesting technology and maintain your direct relationships with the farming community. It sounded reasonable, almost too reasonable. And the equity structure? No equity. Exchange. He looked at me directly. This would be a contractual partnership, not an ownership arrangement. Harrington is prepared to make a significant investment in joint product development, but we're not looking to acquire any portion of Agritech. I tried to hide my surprise. This was not at all what I'd expected from my father, who typically approached business relationships from a position of control. What would Harrington gain from this arrangement? I asked, trying to identify the angle I must be missing. Access to cutting-edge harvesting technology without the expense and time of internal development. Entry into the small to mid-sized farm market where your reputation is already established. And, he added, with what almost qualified as a smile, the opportunity to collaborate with one of the most innovative teams in agricultural technology. I studied him, looking for signs of the calculating businessman I'd grown up with. And what happens if Agritech develops new technology outside the scope of harvesting? Or if Harrington wants to take the partnership in a direction we don't agree with? All intellectual property developed independently would remain with the originating company. Joint developments would be co-owned with clear licensing rights established in advance. He leaned forward slightly. As for strategic direction, the partnership agreement would require mutual consent for any significant changes in scope or application. It sounded almost too good to be true. Why are you proposing this now? You've never shown this level of interest in Agritech before. My father was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful rather than defensive. Several reasons. First, the business case is compelling. Your technology complements ours in ways that could significantly benefit both companies. He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. Second, I've been reevaluating certain aspects of Harrington's approach to innovation and market relationships. Your focus on direct farmer engagement has proven more valuable than I initially assessed. Another pause, longer this time. And third, he met my gaze directly. I've come to respect what you've built here, Elena. You made a different choice than I would have preferred, but you've executed on your vision with determination and skill. That deserves recognition. I tried to process this unexpected acknowledgement, unsure how to respond. My father saved me from having to formulate a reply. Take time to consider the proposal. Discuss it with Marcus and your team. I'll have our legal department draft a preliminary framework agreement for your review. No obligations at this stage, just a starting point for discussions if you're interested in exploring further. I nodded, finding my voice. I'll give it serious consideration. The potential benefits are significant, but we'd need to ensure the partnership supports rather than constrains Agritech's mission. I would expect nothing less. He stood, signaling the end of our conversation. Your mother asked me to extend another invitation, this one to a small dinner at the house next Saturday. Just family, no foundation donors or business associates. The second invitation in as many days, after months of minimal contact. I'll try to make it, I said, not committing fully. Demonstrations and farmer meetings filled most of my weekends these days. He seemed to understand my hesitation. Let us know. Your mother would be pleased to see you, but she understands you're building something here. We rejoined the others outside, where the harvester was completing its demonstration. My father spent another half-hour discussing technical details with Marcus and asking Layla about our operational challenges. I watched this interaction with a strange sense of disconnect, as if observing a parallel universe where my father had always been this engaged with my professional endeavors. When he finally departed with promises to send the partnership framework within a few days, the team gathered around me expectantly. So, Marcus prompted, what's the verdict? Are we entering into an unholy alliance with the Harrington Empire? It's not an acquisition or investment, I clarified. He's proposing a product integration partnership. completely separate companies, collaborating on compatible technologies. That actually sounds reasonable, Layla said, sounding as surprised as I felt. What are the downsides? That's what we need to figure out. I glanced at my watch. But right now, we have the cooperative presentation in an hour. Let's focus on that, and we'll discuss the Harrington proposal at tomorrow morning's strategy meeting. As we packed up for the cooperative demonstration, I found myself torn between excitement about the partnership's potential and lingering suspicion about my father's motives. The proposal made business sense, certainly, but the personal dynamics complicated everything. Was I making decisions based on sound business judgment, or still seeking the approval I'd spent years telling myself I didn't need? I pushed the question aside as we arrived at the cooperative's main facility, where 24 farmers were already gathering. These were the people Agritech was built to serve, and today, they deserved my full attention. The next week passed in a blur of demonstrations, farmer meetings, and internal discussions about the Harrington Partnership proposal. The framework agreement arrived as promised, and our small legal team, essentially one overworked lawyer, on retainer, was reviewing it alongside Marcus, Layla, and me. It's surprisingly straightforward, Rachel, our lawyer, said during our review session. The terms are favorable, with clear protections for Agritech's intellectual property and autonomy. I was expecting more aggressive positioning from Harrington. So were we, Marcus admitted, glancing at me. But Elena's father seems genuinely interested in a mutually beneficial relationship rather than a takeover. I nodded, still not entirely, convinced despite the agreement's favorable terms. What about the exclusivity clauses? Do they limit our ability to partner with other companies on non-harvesting technologies? Rachel flipped through her notes. The exclusivity is narrowly defined. It prevents partnerships with direct competitors to Harrington in irrigation systems, but leaves you free to collaborate with anyone else on other technologies. And the revenue sharing on jointly developed products? Layla asked. 50-50. Split on products developed together, with each company maintaining full revenue from its own products, even when sold as an integrated package. I sat back, trying to identify the catch that surely must exist. It almost seems too good to be true. Sometimes a good deal is just a good deal, Rachel suggested. Harrington gets access to cutting-edge harvesting technology and a foothold in a market segment they've struggled to penetrate. You get manufacturing support, distribution channels, and the Harrington name backing your products without giving up control. I've seen worse arrangements. So you recommend moving forward? Marcus asked her. From a legal and business perspective, yes. The personal dynamics, she added, looking pointedly at me, are outside my professional expertise. After Rachel left, Marcus, Layla, and I remained in the conference room, a generous term for the corner of the barn we'd partitioned off with reclaimed wood panels. You're still not convinced, Marcus observed, studying my expression. The business case makes sense, I acknowledged. But I can't help wondering if there's more to it. My father has never been one for simple partnerships. Maybe he's changing, Layla suggested. Or maybe he's finally recognizing the value of what you've built. Or maybe he's playing a longer game than we can see, I countered. Harrington Agricultural Solutions has absorbed dozens of smaller companies over the years. Many started as partnerships before being fully integrated. The agreement explicitly prevents that without your consent, Marcus reminded me. And let's be honest, we could use Harrington's resources. Our production capacity is maxed out. We're struggling to meet the demand from the pilot program, and scaling up independently would require capital we don't have yet. He wasn't wrong. Despite the enthusiastic response from farmers, Agritech was at a critical juncture. We had proven our technology worked, but transitioning from small-scale production to commercial manufacturing presented significant challenges. The partnership would solve our immediate scaling issues, I admitted. But at what cost to our independence long-term? What if we set clear benchmarks? Layla suggested. Specific points where we evaluate the partnership and have the option to continue or exit. That would give us an escape route if things start moving in a direction we're uncomfortable with. I nodded slowly. That's not a bad idea. We could build performance metrics and review periods into the agreement. And in the meantime, Marcus added, we continue developing our own manufacturing capabilities at whatever pace we can manage. The partnership buys us time to grow more sustainably. It was a pragmatic approach, balancing the immediate benefits of the partnership with protections for our long-term independence. Still, I couldn't entirely shake my reservations. Let's sleep on it, I suggested. We have until the end of the week to respond to the framework agreement. Tomorrow we can discuss specific modifications we'd want to propose. As we wrapped up the meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Mother is hoping you can make it Saturday. Should she expect you for dinner? The family dinner invitation I'd left unanswered. Part of me wanted to decline, to keep my personal and professional worlds separate as I'd been doing since leaving Harrington. But another part recognized that if we moved forward with the partnership, maintaining that separation would become increasingly difficult. I'll be there, I typed back before I could overthink it. What time? His response came quickly. 7. Casual attire, just family. Just family. As if that made it simpler rather than infinitely more complex. Saturday evening arrived too quickly. I'd spent the day at the Sullivan farm troubleshooting an issue with one of the harvester prototypes, leaving barely enough time to return to the farmhouse, shower, and change before heading to my parents' estate. The Harrington family home was a sprawling colonial revival set on 20 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds at the edge of town. As I drove through the imposing gates and up the curved driveway, memories flooded back. Childhood summers spent exploring the gardens, tense family dinners during my teenage rebellions, the awkward celebration when I'd announced my acceptance to MIT instead of my father's alma mater. I parked beside my father's SUV and my mother's vintage Mercedes, noting the absence of other vehicles. True to his word, it appeared to be just family tonight. The front door opened before I could ring the bell, revealing my mother in casual elegance. Linen pants and a silk blouse, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a simple chignon. Elena. She embraced me warmly, her familiar perfume bringing a surprising wave of nostalgia. It's so good to see you. It's been too long. Hi, Mom, I returned her hug, realizing with a pang how true her words were. In focusing so intently on establishing my independence from my father in Harrington, I'd inadvertently distanced myself from her as well. You look wonderful. And you look tired, she said, holding me at arm's length to study my face. Are you getting enough rest? Your father says you're working incredibly hard on this new venture. Startups don't build themselves, I said lightly, following her into the house. But we're making good progress. So I've heard. Your father talks about nothing else these days. The innovative harvesting technology, the farmer-focused approach, the potential partnership. She led me through the familiar hallways toward the informal dining room at the back of the house. It's the most animated I've seen him about a business opportunity in years. This surprised me. Really? He's that interested in the partnership? Interested doesn't begin to cover it. He's been pulling in experts from every division to explore integration possibilities. She glanced back at me with a knowing smile. He's quite proud of what you've built, though he'd probably never say it quite that directly. I tried to reconcile this information with my lingering suspicions about my father's motives. Before I could respond, we entered the dining room where my father was arranging wine glasses on the table. Elena, right on time. He nodded approvingly, as punctuality had always been a virtue in the Harrington household. Red or white? Red, please. I glanced around the room, noting the table was set for just 3. Is David not joining us? I asked, referring to my younger brother who was currently finishing medical school on the West Coast. He had a residency interview he couldn't reschedule, my mother explained. He sends his love and wants to hear all about Agritech next time. He's home. Dinner progressed with surprisingly little tension. My mother asked thoughtful questions about the technology and the farmers we were working with, while my father mostly listened, occasionally adding a comment or question about technical aspects. It wasn't until we moved to the living room for coffee that he broached the subject of the partnership. Have you had a chance to review the framework agreement? We have, I confirmed. Generally, the terms are fair, though we have some proposed modifications regarding performance metrics and review periods. He nodded, seeming unsurprised.